What's the most intimidating city that you have ever traveled to? Well, for us, it was Paris, France.
You're listening to Travel FOMO, a podcast for people self-diagnosed with wanderlust.
My name is Hilarie Houghton, and you are listening to Travel FOMO. With me, as always, is my husband, mon amour, Jamin.
Oui.
And today we are taking you guys to Paris, France.
Paris, France.
The city of love. Not Paris, Texas.
No.
Paris, France.
Equally spelled the same.
Equally in name.
Yeah.
Equal in name only.
And different in every other way imaginable.
Yeah. And it's the city of love, Paris, France, city of love. But we had maybe a less than romantic arrival because we arrived to a tiny airport, maybe the tiniest airport. I think we did decide it was the tiniest airport that we ever went to.
Well, small airports and Ryanair always equal
Yes.
romance.
Well, romance, and it's pretty common on Ryanair. So, and that's fine because that is exactly why we chose Ryanair. So we could get all of those discounts that you get from those little small airports. But this one was really small and it was really far away from the city center.
Yes, it was.
Which is one of the challenges about arriving by air is that, you kind of get dropped off out in the middle of nowhere versus in the middle of your city if you were on a train.
I will say that this airport in particular was particularly far away from the city center.
Yeah.
In that it was in the same country, and that's basically it. Like I was shocked.
It was pretty far.
Because we picked a flight to Paris and it lists it as a Paris airport, but when you look at it on a map, it is nowhere near Paris.
Yeah. That's a little crazy, but it is what it is. We had to arrive by airplane for the most part because we're coming from Dublin. We didn't want to go back through England. Mm-hmm. So it was kind of one of those things where it's like we didn't want to do the ferry thing. So we just took a flight, and maybe we might have been a little cranky because we were coming from Dublin.
Dublin got us one more time by making us fly again.
It got us. But and it was a little bit of an adventure, right? Getting from the Paris airport into the actual Paris city. Yeah. Because we had to take, so we arrived by plane. We had to take a train and a bus to get to where we needed to be in Paris. So it was kind of a long travel day.
Yeah, that was a longer day than I think we originally bargained for, and we had to walk a lot once we got there.
Yeah.
And we did it all because of Ryanair. And for those of you unfamiliar with air travel in the Europe area, Ryanair is a super, super cheap way to fly as long as you meet all of the stipulations, which there are tons about bag sizes and check bags, and everything costs a little extra. If you want a seatbelt, you're going to pay a little extra for it. But it's a really cheap way to go. Do you think that flying Ryanair is worth the discounts? Because we took several Ryanair flights on this trip. Do you think it's worth the discount? Or would you rather just fly a normal airline and just be like, just let me pay up front? Because I feel like Ryanair gets you a little bit if you do anything but get on the plane with more than a coat.
Yeah. No, I think it's totally worth it. I love Ryanair. I remember when we were shopping for this trip, this exact flight, at one point it was like $6. Yeah. And then another point it was like $12 per ticket. And yeah, you have to pay for your bags, but still you're talking about like maybe a $75 flight.
Right.
Per person. Like it's just, the cost is so ridiculously good, even compared to taking a train or a ferry or anything like that. It's so competitive that I would totally, I'm all about Ryanair.
Yeah, I do think it is a great way to get around. I think if we lived in Europe, you would just go everywhere you could on Ryanair. I think it's a great way to kind of pop around.
Yeah. Well, and to be clear, Ryanair is one option. There are others. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, and I know you guys, like from America, you're probably familiar with other different flights that you can take to get to the Caribbean or different places, and you go really cheap, but you really got to play by their rules. And as long as you're prepared to play by their rules, it's really not a big deal. So
yeah. Well, then once we finally made it into Paris itself, it's a little intimidating. It's kind of an intimidating city. Like you walk around and the city once feels very sophisticated. It is this like city of romance, and it has all this history to it and all these museums. And so it has this very sophisticated, almost formal feel to it.
Mm-hmm.
And that can be a little intimidating, especially if you're not used to, like, we're a little more casual. And so that formality makes things feel a little intimidating. And then the language barrier was pretty intimidating. And I mean, even for myself, I had done Duolingo and like studied French a little bit, not nearly as much as I should have, but some. And I kind of felt like a little bit of confidence, like coming into it, like, oh, maybe I'll be okay. And that was kind of like immediately shattered. It's also a really busy city, so the traffic is kind of crazy, and like there's just a lot of adjustments that have to happen, I feel like, all at once. And it made it a little intimidating for me.
Yeah. Although it's funny, like my mind plays tricks on me because I come back and you give me just a little bit of time and I remember something differently. So I look back and I'm like, no, it was great. I loved it. But then whenever I look back over my notes, I'm like, oh no, this is how I felt. Like I was intimidated. I did not want to have to talk to anybody just because for me, the language barrier was just the biggest barrier.
Yeah, I definitely felt the same way. And we had a discussion when we initially were talking about our time in Paris. I was like, no, you like feel like you go into a little boulangerie, like a little bakery, and I could order some stuff. And then I remembered, like, through our discussions that we had, that no, not in Paris. Like later on when we came back into France, I was a little bit better about that. But in Paris, it was very, very intimidating. And in every interaction, I feel like I just like would point to things and hope that people understood me a little bit. And I feel like in Paris, there's a lot of people that don't necessarily want to help you along with your struggling through the language.
Okay.
Like people are kind of content to just let you struggle. And I feel like in America and other places, if you see somebody struggling, you kind of like jump in and try to help them out a little bit. And I feel like that's not necessarily the case in Paris. They're content to just watch you flounder and struggle, and maybe even be a little bit annoyed that you're struggling.
Okay, so when was the first time you felt that? Or maybe some examples of when you felt that.
I know we went into a boulangerie to pick up some pastries or some croissants or something like that. And I remember coming in and everyone's moving through the line quickly. And I felt like it was like Seinfeld in the Soup Nazi, where you're supposed to stand and then immediately when it's time for you to order, you stand up and you say your order, and then you take a step and you pay and you get your food and you go. Mm-hmm. And it was just a struggle. And I think I'd had that kind of false confidence, like coming into it, like, oh yeah, I'll be fine. And like these kind of situations. And I realized like the language is coming so fast, and it's like the pronunciation is so different than what I was anticipating, that it just immediately just like smacks you in the face to where you're like, oh yeah, I know nothing. And I can't get through it. I'm just going to point.
Yeah. And
like hand a fistful of money and just hope that it's enough.
Yeah.
So you like coming back to Paris, because I'd never been, but you had been before with your sister. We talk about that in the secret season.
Yeah.
For the devotees that listened, they might recall that. How do you think this was different than when you were there before?
Well, yeah, you know how we talk about being a little overwhelmed?
Mm-hmm.
Well, you're less overwhelmed than second time around, because
that makes sense.
Yeah, because you're like already more familiar with it. I really enjoyed it more this time. I thought it was great. I felt a little less vulnerable. So if you guys listen to the other episode from the secret season where I talk about Paris with my sister, we talk about how we met someone and he was walking around with us and he kind of like pointed out like, hey, you girls need to be really careful. Like,
yeah.
And I had like, used the ATM in front of him or something. And he was like, hey man, you just like handed me your card, like to try to get me to help you. Like I could have saw your pen and like walked away and it really, boom, it just shut down the fun for me because I knew he was right and it like sobered me up quite a bit. And so I think I had a little bit of that lingering most of the time we were there. So a little bit of that like seriousness. And it just, I don't know, it just wasn't my favorite. It was like a pretty dirty city. There were a lot of people asking us for money. I remember sitting at the Eiffel Tower with my sister thinking like, this is the coolest thing. And we just kind of laid out on this blanket and I remember trying to like take a nap out in the sun and it just felt awesome. And then just constantly people started coming up asking us for money. And it was just really, it never stopped the whole time we were in Paris, just constant people coming to ask you for money.
Yeah.
And that wasn't the case this time around. So they've done some things, I assume they've done some things to, I don't know, change that up, or maybe there's not as many people in need. I'm not really sure, but it was definitely different this time.
Yeah, I remember a little bit of that in the train stations, but you're right. That's really about it. Like
It's
when we were
very
around in
rare.
the city,
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't really happening as much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This trip was it was pretty interesting because we put in so many miles by foot.
We did. Paris is a big city.
It's such a big city, and we covered so much of it by ground, literally walking or running it. That first day we put in 16 and a half miles, something like that.
Yeah.
Crazy. I was super proud of us, but man, that one got me.
Yeah, that'll wipe you out putting in those kind of miles. I remember that day because we got off that day and started with a run. And then just did all the sightseeing we could as well. And yeah, that was a long day, an awesome day, packed full of stuff, but it was a lot on the feet.
You guys, it was such an iconic run. It was really, really cool. We saw everything from Pont Neuf to the Louvre. We just kind of went all over the metro. Arc de Triomphe, the Eiffel Tower, so many things. We just got to see so many amazing things. And we got to see them before everyone else was on the streets, which was so incredible. Just imagine the weather's perfect. There's no rain, there's no wind. It's just nice and crisp air. I do remember thinking it was a really hard run, but I think it was just, I was already really tired. Like my legs actually hurt from running all the time. And I remember I just really didn't want to do it, but I'm glad that we did. But it just ended up being it was a lot. I remember thinking I'm pretty sure it was a pretty long run for us as well. But it was pretty amazing. It was definitely worth it. And it's one of my snapshots in time, a moment in my memory where I'm just wow, that is Paris to me, is going on that run.
Yeah, I remember it a lot that way too. I remember the moment on Pont Neuf where we're standing there. I think it was right at the beginning of our run and the sun's just coming up. I think there was kind of a feeling of we made it. I feel like there was a lot of those moments on this trip because we had planned and worked and saved so much and so hard to do this, that's one of the moments that I remember feeling like we did it.
This is really happening.
Yeah, we made it. All of that, because we're also on a run, and so we'd been running at home, and we'd been telling ourselves on the mornings before we had to go to work that we got up early and ran, and we didn't want to, but it was like, no, because we want to run in Paris and we want to run in London and those kinds of things. And it really made it feel like it had paid off.
Yeah.
Like we're actually doing and we made it.
Yeah. That's a great feeling. That day was, I mean, like you said, we like went so many different places.
Yeah. Because when we got back from the run, we got cleaned up and we went to that cemetery. Is it Père Lachaise? I think it's a famous cemetery there in Paris, and we got to walk around that. Jim Morrison, several other famous people are buried there. That was incredible, like nothing else I've ever seen. We went back to the Eiffel Tower and took some pictures there. We went by Notre Dame.
And just for the record, you guys are probably like, why do you keep going to the Eiffel Tower? But when you're like all sweaty and nasty and your photos of you in front of the Eiffel Tower are you like in like running gear and headphones, it's nice to go back and take a photo when you're actually like cleaned up, wearing makeup or whatever.
Well, I was, and they were setting up for some kind of concert or something. And so there was like a bunch of like stage and stuff sort of in front of the Eiffel Tower, I remember. And I was a little disappointed by that. If I had been going to that concert, I would have thought that it was awesome. But as it was, there was just kind of junk in the way of the Eiffel Tower. But we did go back and got some pictures there. We went by Notre Dame. It was still closed because of the fire that had happened in 2019. So
really recent. That feels so recent when you think about all of the fires that like take down cathedrals.
Yeah.
Across history. Like it's usually somebody saying that and you're like, oh, that was like 1700. A big fire came in.
Yeah. It's some like ancient story about a cow that like kicked over a lantern or something.
Yeah.
But yeah, this was in 2019. And I remember seeing that in 2019 and thinking like, man, like I wish we had gone to Paris before that happened. But getting to see the outside of it was still cool. Seeing that it was being restored was cool and gives you hope for like, well, one day I'll get to go back and see it. It'll be interesting to see what it's restored to, but a little disappointing that we couldn't go in at that point. Then we went on to see a bunch of other stuff. I think we ended up actually starting to take the metro at some point because we were like, okay, yeah, we've gone so far and walked so far. And I think just to save on time.
Well, we even used the metro to get to our starting point of our run.
That's right.
Because Paris is so big that we couldn't even run to all of those places. We had to like get on the metro. Yeah. To run, and I'm pretty sure.
I think you're right.
I'm pretty sure. And then we definitely did like start running we definitely did get back on the metro throughout the day because that metro system is crazy. It's like spaghetti.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. That I feel like every other metro system is like a grid with some like circular lines and you have to change trains like twice, but in Paris, you're right, it looks like a plate of spaghetti. And you're like,
when you look at the map, it's crazy.
Yeah, I have to get on the blue line to the yellow line, and then the brown line will take me back to the blue line. That'll take me to where I want to go. We did make it to Luxembourg Gardens.
Yeah. Oh, tell people about that. That was a cool one.
Oh, it's a beautiful, beautiful place. Like if you're going to Paris, for sure, go to the Luxembourg Gardens. And it's just this massive complex around an old palace but the gardens are amazing. They have these perfectly manicured trees, huge fields, and all these people are there just hanging out. And if you want to feel something European, it's go to one of these massive, beautiful parks and just see all the people just hanging out.
Yeah.
It's so cool.
It felt like incredibly safe. Safe,
Yeah.
fun. It felt like the popular thing to do. It felt like, where is everyone in Paris? Well, they're not at the Eiffel Tower. They're at Luxembourg Gardens. Like, this is where real Parisians like hang out. That's what it felt like to me.
Right. And you instantly are like, we should have brought a blanket and a bottle of wine because we could just sit down here and make some friends and hang out the rest of the day.
Yeah. Yeah. That's literally what everyone was doing, is just sitting around on blankets. They had their little kids running around. They like, yeah, I remember thinking like, oh my gosh, I would wish like we were here with friends. Like, I wish we lived here and we're all just hanging out with our friends here.
Yeah. I do feel like so many times vacations and trips get so fast and furious that you don't leave yourself time for sitting and hanging out in the gardens. And I kind of wish we'd done a little more of that.
Yeah.
It's crazy because you don't want to trade all the things. Like, there's nothing that I would like give up having seen. So I feel like we did use our time well, but there are those like, man, I wish we'd built in just a little bit more time to just hang out.
To go to the Moulin Rouge.
We did do that.
We did do that. That was, I think that might have been like one of the next things that we did.
I think you're right. Yeah. I think I was back on the metro.
Yeah. Because this time I'd like promised myself that we would like buy tickets and actually do dinner and a show at the Moulin Rouge. But man, we just still didn't have enough time for that. And it was expensive.
Yeah.
It was I think, well over $100 per person. So it was like, that's just a lot. But it's so Paris. I'm like, I still really think that would be fun. And it's still such a big draw. Like, we showed up to the little area. It's kind of like just a intersection that's kind of a popular intersection. And Moulin Rouge is still like, it's still spinning, and people are taking photos and standing up on, the bench across the street trying to take the best photo that they can. It was, it was very much an attraction.
I am surprised that there aren't like boot marks worn into that spot, because I feel like the entire time that we were there, just person after person kept standing up on this little ledge, having someone take their picture with the Moulin Rouge in the background. And it was just a steady stream of people right there.
Yeah. I feel like it's all thanks to like Ewan McGregor and Nicole Kidman. Thanks, guys, for making the Moulin Rouge real to us.
Bringing it across the pond.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, then we finally let ourselves stop.
Yes,
finally. And have some dinner. We went back to, I remember we wanted to get back to kind of close to where our Airbnb was. I have in my notes that it was Au Cadran Voltaire. Oh, so
well said.
That's probably not anywhere close to being right.
Probably not. No.
The food was really good.
It was really good.
And
we literally just stopped off the street. Like, we're just like, you want to walk in here?
Yeah. We were tired and beat down at that point from having gone 16 and a half miles, and we're ready to just stop, and found that place. The food was really good. I remember our waiter was actually a little bit helpful, like with us interpreting things. I will say, if you're going to go for a nice meal in Paris, like, do some research, because the menus are crazy and full of stuff that you don't know. But that was a fun place to people watch.
It was.
Yeah, because we were set. I remember we were set outside, and there in Paris, and well, in a lot of Europe, like the entire sidewalk kind of gets consumed by the restaurant.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
So like tables and chairs are set up, and I feel like you'll see that a little bit in the US. It'll be like one or two tables really close to the door or window of a shop, and then like most of the sidewalk is left open. This is the entire sidewalk. Like it takes up the entire sidewalk. So people on the sidewalk are literally walking through the tables. Mm-hmm. And so we sat there and people watched for a long time.
That was really fun. In fact, right now I am editing the video. So we're like we're recording this podcast while we travel. I'm currently editing the video for the Paris trip, and this scene cracks me up so much of us just sitting here people watch, and because we started filming each other and we just like had a lot of fun with it and it was hilarious. And I saw these two little boys that were like young, like teens, preteens, and I think they were twins, and they were like, and I remember they got like really mad at each other. Something there was, you could just tell, like you could just people, you could, you know, whenever you're just watching people and you can just tell, oh, something's up with them. And they were like mad at each other, and they like were walking next to each other, and then they'd like separate from each other and be like, no, you know, just like get away from me. And then they would end up walking next to each other again, and they'd separate again, and it was cracking me up. Oh my gosh. But I really enjoyed literally just watching people watching a whole different country at work. Yeah. And Paris is so different than the rest of France anyway, that it's like a country in of its own. And so you just get to kind of like watch it work.
Yeah. Yeah. It really was a great way to sort of end that first full day there, just hanging out, having some good food and some wine.
Yep. Yeah. I love that they do not care. Nothing holds them back from sitting outside.
Oh yeah. Noise,
like,
traffic,
oh yeah.
weather.
Noise, traffic, doesn't matter.
None of it.
They are like, that literally is in my notes. They don't care about noise. They don't care about traffic. They don't care about someone stepping all over them or smoking in their face. Like nothing's going to keep them from being outside. And it's not like Paris is the most scenic mountain views or right. anything like that. It's not even about the scenery. It's just about like, this is where we hang out. This is what we do. Like we own the sidewalks, and it's just kind of fun to live in that world.
It's very much dining in the city.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
more
many,
than probably anywhere else.
Yeah. So many sidewalk cafes. I wonder what their weather is like year round. If it's just like such amazing weather year round that they just always end up, or if like come winter, it's just like, there's no chance you see anybody on a sidewalk, like sitting down in a sidewalk cafe.
I don't know. We'll just have to go back and find out.
Yeah, I know. I think we need to go back at Christmas. I'm determined to go back everywhere we went. Just go back at Christmas so I can know.
you do want to visit every place that we've been to at Christmas.
Yep.
It'll just be like Ryanair and just like day trips all the time for the entire month of December.
Yeah. Well, such a huge part of Paris too is museums. What was your favorite museum that we went to?
Oh, the Louvre for me. Yeah. It was incredible.
I knew that. I just felt obligated to at least let you just at least ask.
Let me put it out there.
And let you put it out there.
In case anyone was wondering, like, which of the museums, like, I like the one that's packed full of all the history.
Yeah.
Or some of the others. Yeah.
Oh, that's so crazy that you would like that.
Yeah, the one with all of the history. That's the one.
Yeah. Well, we had like a whole day, like a museum day is basically what we called it.
Yeah.
Because we started out at, let me see if I can get this right. Musée d'Orangerie.
Yeah.
I think I got that right. It looks a lot like Museum of the Oranges, but it's not.
It's not about oranges. It's not a museum about oranges.
I always think of oranges whenever I like see the name of that museum. But this one was recommended to us by our friends Catherine and Bear Espinoza. Thanks, guys, because we really did like it. It was a little bit smaller of a museum. It was really easy to get in and out of. And I honestly hadn't heard anybody else ever talk about it. It was mostly Monet. Yeah. Which was really cool to see. There were a lot of water lily paintings by Monet. So if you don't know much about him, he's a painter, and he actually had a garden that he had created and built so that he could literally just paint it.
So he could paint it.
And so he did. And so what I did not know about Monet is that like these water lilies paintings that he has, they are massive. They're so big.
Yeah.
Like you're talking about the length of like oh gosh, the length of this Airstream, like a 30-foot painting or more.
Several of them, yeah.
So, and just as tall, like, I mean, you're talking like 10 feet tall by like 30 feet. No, yeah, even longer than that. Long, skinny. It was just really crazy once you actually stop and look. Like, wow, this is massive. And there are multiple ones, and they're all in this circular room so that they kind of offer, it's kind of like you're just in a garden and you just kind of look all around you, and there's like these different viewpoints. I just thought that was really cool. I loved that.
Yeah, it really was pretty incredible with the curvature, I think, is what really got me, because you're in these, like you said, these circular rooms, and you're just surrounded by it, and knowing that like it was painted this way, and then this museum was built to display them, was another thing that just kind of blew my mind. Of like, they're so good and so significant that you're going to build a building to house them in the way that they're meant to be displayed. Was
That's
really
true.
cool.
Yeah. One of the things that I learned on this trip was like that there's Monet and there's Manet, and they are both painters, kind of similar in style, in how they paint, but they were actually friends. They influenced each other. They like, I don't know. I just think that's super fascinating. And their names are almost the same. It could be so confusing. Like, you could very easily get them confused. One of the things that I learned about Manet is that he did more paintings of people. And you'll see with Monet, it's much more like gardens, outdoors, things at a distance. And with Manet, it was more like people. Like, he would get into details of and facial features. He actually did a series of paintings, which was probably my favorite of his. And it's like profiles of men and women in their attire, like seasonal attire. And it was all about showing off style and fashion, which is very French.
It's surprising that you would be drawn to that.
I know, right? I just thought that was really cool. And I didn't realize what a big deal fashion was back in the day. The thing that's interesting about Monet is that, like, he lived most of his life in poverty. I always find that to be so fascinating when you're like, what? How is that even possible? You're a genius. Everybody loves your work. And yet you probably had like a pretty hard life. Like, you weren't really maybe appreciated.
Yeah, I feel like in our society now, a lot of the people that are famous for their art are really well known and consequently like really well compensated, and they have celebrity and status. And back then that didn't necessarily happen until after you were gone. That's such a crazy thing. I remember us being in that museum and having a conversation, and me sort of confessing to you that there's a lot about art that I don't really get. And I feel like you could show me a painting by a great artist that's worth a ton of money, and you could show me something that like a third grader did, and I may not be able to tell the difference. What is it about art that makes art in your mind?
I think that's a really good question. I think sometimes it has a lot to do with like, were you the first? Were you the first to do something? Were you the first to try out this style of painting, or the first to throw something on the wall that like nobody else would dream of doing, but you were willing to take that risk and experiment, I guess.
Sort of that like originality.
It's not necessarily that their work was so incredible so much as they might have been the first to do something. And you might see a million other people do that today, and it might not seem like that big of a deal anymore, but it was for that person at that time.
Gotcha. Because
like the Mona Lisa and stuff like that.
Yeah, because everyone else is trying to copy this thing that the original came up with.
Right.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I'll buy it.
I really want to tell you about this great new thing I found. Every time I bring it on a trip, I'm so glad I did. It saves money, makes life easier, and I'm better looking because of it. The only catch is, I haven't found it yet. So if your product can make our lives better, let's talk. Because we want to know and we want to share.
So after we left that museum, I remember we went and we had lunch in a park.
Oh, we did. We
Yeah.
had Pringles again.
Yep.
I was carrying around my Pringles through all of those museums.
Mm-hmm. You had your
I
snacks.
was rattling.
Snacks in your bags.
Rattling. What did you call me on the trip? You called me
Le femme de snack.
Le femme de snack.
You had parceled away some sandwiches and Pringles for us, which I was very grateful for.
And I would always just put them in my bag, and it'd be like 4 or 5 hours later, and I'd be like, okay, here's a warm sandwich.
Yeah. Here's this sandwich that's been on the metro. Hope you have fun.
So one of the things that I love about Paris is that they have water fountains everywhere.
Yep.
And there's a lot of that in different parts, different European cities, but Paris is really good about their water fountains. There's like 1,500 of them across the city, which is crazy. And then some of those, like I want to say when I looked it up at the time, there was like 15 different ones across the city. They had sparkling water, which is so cool. So all you have to do is carry around a water bottle and you can constantly have free water that tastes really good. And it's really clean and safe. And I don't know. I love that. And they're actually beautiful. These water fountains are like really pretty. You guys can see in the video on YouTube. We kind of show you guys what they're like and how to use them. But it's a great perk.
Yeah, I feel like Europe is way ahead of the US when it comes to that thing in particular. Like, especially cities like Paris and even Rome, where you have these like access to water.
Yeah.
And so you're not constantly spending $2 or $3 on bottled water. You're not constantly filling up trash cans with plastic bottles.
Yeah.
And you just carry your bottle around, fill up and go. It's great.
Yeah.
It really is.
For sure.
But then we went to the Louvre, and I remember we bought tickets, and it was like a timed entry. The Louvre is massive. And I'd heard a lot of people say like, oh, it takes you days to go through the Louvre and things like that. And I remember thinking like, well, maybe if you're like a super art person that knows how to properly appreciate all this stuff. But for some guy from Texas, we can probably do a half day in the Louvre and be fine. But it is an incredibly huge place. I think it's 3 miles total.
Oh, I forgot that.
Yeah, if you were to walk all of the displays, like one into the other, it's 3 miles. And so you're not going to see it all in a day. And I remember trying to get in to see the Mona Lisa. And it's in kind of a room. There's other paintings in the room, other great famous paintings in the room, but none of them seem to matter because the Mona Lisa's in there. And they have these, like the mousetrap lines where you're going back and forth, zigzagging to get up there. And the line, very well organized.
Yeah.
Orderly fashion.
It's like rope and sanction kind of.
Yeah, like belted off, switchbacks all the way up until you get up to the Mona Lisa. And then, for whatever reason, it just becomes a mosh pit. And I remember thinking,
so
like,
true.
How did we not just continue the line? We were literally 3 steps ago, we were literally in an orderly line, and now we're just like
elbows in the
crammed
face
here.
and everything.
Oh, yeah.
It was crazy.
It's like Black Friday when Walmart's selling TVs for $15. It's just insane.
Yeah.
And I remember being so frustrated by that of like, why do we not just continue to file through in the orderly fashion that we were? Why do we why is it not just all chaos or none of it?
Yeah.
That was frustrating to me, but we did get to see it.
We did. Yeah.
We got close. So we checked the Mona Lisa box.
Yeah.
But then we got to walk around the Louvre and see a lot of the other stuff that it offers. So much art from so many different cultures.
Yeah,
which
true.
I didn't really
like worldwide
Yeah.
stuff.
I didn't really anticipate seeing like Egyptian art and Greek art and all of those kinds of things here at the Louvre. That was really interesting to me.
What was like your favorite thing that you saw?
What's that called? The Winged Victory sculpture.
Wow, that's awesome.
I think so. Like it, and the way they have it displayed, it's like at the top of these stairs. So you look up and see it, and it's massive.
It's so awesome.
Like it's huge. If you're not familiar with it, go watch the YouTube video that we have. Like, I think we've got some images of it on there that you'll be able to see what we're talking about. But it's massive, and I don't know why. Maybe it's the emphasis that everyone else puts on it, and it's like that, like power of suggestion. But it really is moving to look at. Like when you see it, you're sort of inspired a little bit and in awe a little bit, and I don't really know why. But you are, and they set it up in such a grand fashion at the top of these stairs that even makes it that much more majestic.
Yeah.
What about you? What was your favorite piece of art from the Louvre?
It's that one, hands down. I feel like you read my mind, and I've probably mentioned it before. I've like had the magnet and everything about Winged Victory, and it has just always blown my mind since the first time I saw it. It's by far my favorite. I honestly didn't know it was your favorite until now. So like,
yeah,
that's pretty crazy. Yeah.
And it might, I know I was really excited to see it because you loved it so much. And so maybe that, that suggestion.
I influenced you maybe a little bit. Yeah.
Like pulled me in that direction. But it really is.
I remember
really is incredible.
I remember hyping you up about it, actually, now that I think about it. Because I remember being like, I can't wait to see this. I can't wait to see it again. I wonder if it's the same. I wonder if they've moved it. Because I remember the placement of it being so dramatic, and people just, are crawling all over the place on the stairs near it because they just like love it so much. And the thing I didn't remember was that it was from the 2nd century BC, before Christ, 200 years before Christ. This was created. It's pretty amazing considering we see a lot of other things that are like Renaissance and like all this other stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, this goes way back before then.
Yeah.
And I think that makes it really special is its age. Again, going back to like it being the first. And I think that to me is like, whoa, that's like really crazy. This goes way, way back compared to all the other sculptures that you see there.
Yeah.
So
that's really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought that the apartments there were really interesting.
Yeah.
Napoleon's apartments you can go tour. I was surprised at how few people were actually in that sort of section of things. Just beautiful, amazing apartments with all kinds of incredible furniture and art and stuff throughout it. I was really glad we went and saw sort of that section of it. Like, I thought that was really great.
It used to be a palace. The king used to live there, and he's got his old apartments there that you can go tour. And most people don't know that. And we certainly didn't until we started planning the trip.
No, I didn't know that it was a palace. I had no idea about that until we got there.
Yeah.
The story of Napoleon is such a fascinating thing of like really anyone who thinks that they should rule the world and then nearly does is such a crazy thing to me. How a country can, especially a country, I mean, France is a huge country, but for then this guy who seemingly shouldn't be a leader, like just wants it so bad and has such a chip on his shoulder and such a need to prove himself that he goes to war with everybody, and ultimately it becomes his downfall because he invades Russia. But like seeing his apartments and the history and stuff that they had around that, I just thought was fascinating.
I think I was most surprised by the fact that you love the Louvre so much.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's mostly art,
Right.
and I don't really think of you as being much of an art lover.
Yeah.
But I should have known because there's so much, it's so rich in history. And art is so rich in history, but it's more than art. It's like artifacts.
Yes.
So I think that's maybe what a lot of people don't necessarily know, is that it's not just art, it's artifacts.
Yeah, I agree. And I think going into it, I kind of thought the same. Like, I was like, oh, we'll see some really famous art and I'll be able to appreciate that because it's famous art. But I was so surprised at how much history was in it.
Yeah.
And like you said, artifacts that tie things back to like, oh, this goes back to that, and this is from this time, and it pulls that history all together in one place.
For sure. And it's just so iconic for Paris. But the other thing that's so iconic for Paris is the food. Oh my gosh. I had like a little gurgle in my throat just now while I was like thinking about the food.
You were like, I want a croissant.
I want a croissant. Okay, what was your favorite pastry? In all of France, not just Paris, but Paris has got it all, I feel like.
Oh yeah. What we got a pastry at a boulangerie in Lyon, Bichon Citron.
Oh, yeah.
That was it. And it was it's a pastry with like a lemon sort of filling to it, and it like I got one the first day in Lyon, and I insisted on going back and getting one the next morning as well.
Yeah.
On the morning that we were going to leave, I was like, I don't have much time, but I'm going to go get one of these.
Yeah. Yeah. There are so many good ones. So I love croissants.
Mhm.
And of course, I love the French croissants.
Very good.
So much. I also love palmier. And palmier is like elephant ears. That's kind of its other nickname. It's got a lot of nicknames, actually. I was just looking it up recently because I want to learn to make it. It was invented in the early 1900s in France. And it's basically just like crispy, flaky goodness. It's amazing. It's kind of like a French biscuit, and depending on where you get it, it could be more or less crunchy. I love the crunchiest of the crunchy kind that you can get. In fact, I bought them in France, and I think I started buying them there in Paris, and like they're just this perfect amount of sweetness. You can like buy them as little crisp that come in a box, and it was like €1 for a whole box of them.
I do remember you buying those.
Oh
Yeah.
my gosh. I was like obsessed because I could just like nibble on them, and they have like this glaze of like kind of cinnamon and sugar around the edges. And oh my goodness, I love them. And they just kind of like, they're just so crispy. They just kind of like crunch and fall all over you and flake everywhere. Oh my goodness. They're so good. But
So were those the first time that you had it? Were the ones that we bought in the grocery store for €1? Was that the first time that you had one?
no, I don't think so. But I couldn't tell you like the first time I'd ever had one. But like, but I really got into them while we were here.
Gotcha.
And really decided like I love these. And the thing that really stood out to me was there was kind of a version of them that I bought that was, it kind of looked like more like a crunchy rectangle, but it was kind of the same kind of pastry,
Mhm.
but it was more of it wasn't an elephant ear shape, so it might be considered something completely different, but I considered it like a giant palmier. But it was sandwiched with a thin layer of like a red jelly, like a strawberry jelly maybe, and like in between, so it's these two huge squares of flaky goodness with a really thin layer of jelly in the middle. Oh my goodness. I remember buying it at this little bakery across from where we were staying in our
Yeah.
Airbnb. My gosh, it was unbelievable. So good. So good.
Didn't we try to go back and get it for you another time, and like they didn't have them like the second time?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. I went back and really wanted it again and I couldn't get it.
Yeah, I remember we chased it a few times, and I feel like it was harder to get than we originally realized.
Yeah. Was that the same place that you got a quiche that you really liked?
Yes.
It was really good.
Yeah, that was a really good bakery, like you said, just across the street from where we stayed. We had a lot of good stuff from there. The croissants were really good from there too.
It was just a little hole in the wall place. It was great. So what would you do differently? Like, we were only there a couple days, so that kind of is a like it's a little flashback of our trip. But what would you do differently next time you were to go to Paris?
I think if I were to go back, I would go to Versailles, like the palaces of Versailles.
Yeah.
Which a lot of people do as a little day trip from there. They're supposed to be incredible. So I would do that. There was also a chapel there, the Saint Chapel or Santi Chapel. I'm not sure exactly how you pronounce it, but it's a chapel there, kind of in the heart of Paris, really close to Notre Dame, and it is stained glass. Basically, it's all stained glass, and I've seen pictures and it looks incredible. And we thought about going, we talked about going, but we had already paid to get into so many places that it just felt like, man, we're gonna have to pay to get into this other chapel, and it was like 18 euro a piece, and so we decided not to. And I kind of wish I had done that at this point. So I would definitely do those two things, or things that I feel like we didn't get to see.
Mm-hmm.
And then probably in the perfect world, just eat at more nice restaurants and eat more pastries.
Yeah. Do you have any advice for people who, whenever it comes to going to restaurants and stuff like that? I know you've rattled off some advice that you have had for other people in Paris. What would that look like?
Yeah, I would say if you're going to go to a nice restaurant, do some research and pick your restaurant and make a reservation. And then, unless you're fluent in French, I would spend some time studying the menu. I feel like French menus a lot of times have a lot of food that we're not familiar with, or at least me, I wasn't familiar with. And so it makes them really intimidating. And some menus aren't available in English, and even the ones that are have stuff that is kind of hard to decipher and pick out, like, what's that going to be like. And so I would do a little research and maybe set myself up for success more in restaurants and in the way that I ordered. Basically,
it's not just that the menus are in French. It's that you're seeing whole different foods that you don't even know. Even if you translated it, you wouldn't know what that is.
Right.
So really, really look at your menu before you go, and you'll have more fun.
Yeah, I think if you know what you want before you go in, you'll probably enjoy it a little more.
Yeah, that's great advice.
What about you? What would you tell someone going to Paris?
Take lots of money. It'd be so fun with money. So fun. Well, I mean, like, we didn't exactly, like, we were doing okay, but like we were, really trying to be thoughtful.
Yeah.
And I would do all of the little bakeries. I would just go big. Like, I would go to those bakeries, but then I would sit down in a garden and just enjoy that food that I bought there. I would enjoy it in a park. And where you and I, like, we would go and eat our sandwiches in the park, but it's not the same as like going to a little bakery or getting some food somewhere and then taking it there. So I would do a whole charcuterie board and wine in a park. I think that sounds like
on a daily.
So amazing. Yeah. You did some Duolingo and learned French. I was learning Spanish and German. We were both kind of trying to like get as much as we could under our feet.
Cover all the bases we could.
Yeah. So what would you say, do you think it helped?
I do think it helped, but not right away.
Okay.
Because we came in and out of France so many times on this trip, I got a lot of bites at the apple before we were done with France. And I feel like by the time that we stopped for our last visit in France, like in Cannes, I feel like I felt a lot more confident and was able to negotiate my way around French a lot more easily, and at least more able to understand and get the gist of things. By no means could I have a conversation in French, but I could greet somebody and sort of ask a few basic things. But initially, especially in Paris, I was not. I feel like in other places, where we went, Lyon in particular, and Bordeaux, people were a lot more excited to help you out and to see you and to sort of make life easier on you. Whereas I feel like a lot of the people in Paris were kind of, they didn't really care about you one way or the other. I don't feel like they disliked me or had ill will toward me, but it was also kind of like, I'm not here to help you out. You know, like, you're here in my city and it's clear you don't know the language, and I'm not going to help you with that.
Yeah.
And so that's really hard and super intimidating.
Yeah.
And when you're struggling and no one's offering any help, then it really, at least for me, it really makes you like just shut up.
Do you feel like it would be more helpful to like go to France and stay in France for a long time? Or did you think it was most helpful that you went into Paris and then we went to Belgium and then we went to Luxembourg and then we came back into France and then we went to, Czech Republic, and then we came back to France, and we kind of bounced around back in and out of France. So it's almost like your brain got a little break from it. Do you think that was good, or do you think it made it, you had to start all over again?
I feel like getting a little separation from Paris was good, because like the Paris experience made it like, well, I'm not going to try this at all. But then, like, coming back in later on, it was a little more encouraging and helped. So I think maybe immersion in southern France would maybe be the easiest way to like keep it fresh on your mind, keep learning and keep picking up, because I do feel like it was like it would take a day or so to like switch over. Like when we would go from France to Spain, like you say bonjour for like a day until you're like, oh, I gotta switch to a new language now. Or like, especially, you might say merci rather than gracias or grazie when we went into Italy. And I always felt like switching countries, it always took me like a day to like switch your mind over to a new language. So I feel like staying in France probably would have helped more, but it was nice to get a break from it after Paris and sort of being like knocked down and like, hey, you don't know anything.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Well, after Paris, we ended up, we did leave the country. We went to Bruges, Belgium.
Yeah.
Which I love, and I even forgot how much I loved it until we started editing the video and you were like showing me some of the footage, and I was like, oh my gosh, like I am like stumbling all over myself. Like I could hardly express my joy at being in Bruges.
Yeah. You were super giddy to be there.
Oh my gosh.
Which you loved it before. If people listen to the Secret season, when you went there with Jessica, like you raved about it then. Mm-hmm. And so I was anticipating you being really excited about being there, but you were even more so just elated.
Yeah, I was really overwhelmed. I'm really looking forward to that podcast too. So you guys should definitely tune into the next episode because I'm like a little beside myself. Even just, watching the footage again. It is what makes it so unique. Just to kind of give you guys a little tease, a little taste of Bruges before we go it is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, which, as you continue to travel with us through these European places, you're going to hear us say that over and over again. And it means it's amazing, basically.
Yeah,
it means you should definitely, if you see that something is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, it's going to be good.
Yeah.
Oh man, it just, it's like stepping back in time. It is a dramatic view of a historic village that is just pristine.
It really is.
It's lovely.
It's fairy tale land.
It really is. If you're on social media, be sure to connect with us there. We are on Facebook, TikTok, YouTube. We've been having a lot of fun with like some of the TikTok and YouTube videos. The YouTube videos are a little bit newer for us, and we are loving that because we are getting to actually show you guys all of these places that we are going, because it is so hard to do it justice with just our words. So all the things you heard us talk about today, you're going to see that in the video on YouTube. It is already out there, and you can go check that out on YouTube and everywhere on social media. We are Travel FOMO Podcast. So that is how you can find us.
Yep. We appreciate you checking that stuff out. Thanks for subscribing and leaving a review if you would. We really appreciate that as well.
Yeah.
I'm so excited to start this new season in Central Europe and head down the road with you.
That's right. And we just encourage you guys, take the step to go ahead and travel to those places like Paris was for us, the places that make you a little bit more uncomfortable. They stretch you and take you out of your comfort zone. Try to do that because it is so worth it and because life is short.
Wonder well.